Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and tonight we'll be talking about one of those down-ballot candidate races that everyone likes to ignore, but no one should. This is the candidates for judges, and our guest tonight is Judge Alfred Swanson, who is running for Cook County Circuit Court countywide. Judge Swanson, thank you so much for being here.
Kevin, nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome. Well, we were just discussing, we've known each other for quite a few years, and it's the first time we've been able to have you on the show.
Well, I'm pleased to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about the election. It's coming up March 18th.
March 18th, early voting starts Monday, March 3rd and goes through the 15th. And then the election day actually is March 18th, Tuesday. Third Tuesday in March is primary election day in the state of Illinois.
So some people who are watching this on air will, that'll already have come and gone by the time they see this. But for those who watch us on the web, which is where actually and we'll get to this in a minute from your broadcasting perspective, but as you know, television is now moving more and more to the web, so I think our larger audience is there. So for those watching us on the web, that's news to them, and they need to know that. So.
Okay. Well, I'm a candidate countywide for judge. My ballot number is 142 on the Democratic ballot. There are no Republicans in the Republican primary for judge countywide. There are in some of the sub-circuits in Cook County, but not countywide where I'm running. So March 18th for me is the election, even though technically there's an election in November on Election Day. When I win on March 18th, as long as I vote for myself in November, I should win. In theory, of course.
Yes.
But no, this is the election, the Democratic primary, and that is the election.
Now, does the Republican Party have the option to appoint someone later if there's no one runs in the primary?
Well, I'm not sure whether they can or not. I think the answer is no, but I'm not positive of that.
However, it's likely that if there were candidates who were interested, they'd be in the primary.
They would be, and there are some Republican races where there are no Democrats in the subcircuits in Cook County, and downstate that is frequently, in several counties downstate, that is frequently the situation.
So I asked this question of all judges, and I know the answer, but I think it's worth discussing. The difference between the subcircuits and the circuit court, and I know many people I talk to are confused about that. What is the difference?
Well, in terms of what we do and our level of hierarchy in the judicial system, there is no difference. The difference is the geographic area from which we're elected. I'm running countywide, which is the entire Cook County, from Sauk Village to Lamont to Elgin to Glencoe, and every place in between.
Including the city of Chicago.
Including the city of Chicago. If you're in Cook County, you're in my district. Now, there are 15 smaller geographical areas in Cook County, and those are called the subcircuits. Judges who are elected from the subcircuits are circuit judges. Those who are elected countywide are circuit judges.
So once you're elected, whether subcircuit or countywide, it's the same duties, right?
And wherever the chief judge wants to assign us, he can, and we could serve any place in the county. From the 6th District Courthouse in Markham to the 3rd District Courthouse in Rolling Meadows to the 2nd District in Skokie, 4th District in Maywood, 5th District in Bridgeview. Makes no difference. Criminal court at 26th Street, juvenile court out at on Roosevelt Road, or I think it's Roosevelt Road.
You would know.
Cermak.
I'd help you out, but I can't.
It's just east of Western Avenue. Or at the Domestic Violence Courthouse at 555 West Harrison, or any of the First Municipal Branch Courts at 51st Street, Belmont and Western, and several other places.
So in fact, when we refer to the circuit court, circuit meaning a circle, a movement, so judges can be assigned and can move around through that circuit,
sure,
correct?
From time to time, can be moved around. Cook County is the largest, I believe it's the largest, unified court system in the country. We have circuit judges and associate judges. I think the number is about 510 judges in Cook County. Statewide in Illinois, there are, I think, about 975 or 980 circuit and associate judges.
So what's the difference between a circuit judge and an associate judge?
No, circuit judges are elected by the people in a popular election, such as the primary coming up on the 18th of March. And judges who are elected, circuit judges, have a 6-year term before they go on the retention ballot, which is the yes-no ballot in November. Associate judges serve a 4-year term. They are chosen by the circuit judges. Do the same job, are paid a little bit less money, but the job we all do is the same.
Now, you are currently serving as a judge.
I'm a circuit court judge. I'm a circuit judge.
And you were appointed by the Supreme Court.
I was appointed by the Supreme Court because a judge retired and there was a vacancy to fill. And under the Illinois Constitution, when there's a vacancy, the Supreme Court is the appointing authority to fill that vacancy. And that appointment runs only until the next election. And then that appointed judge needs to run for election to become elected and to have his own term or her own term as a circuit judge.
And so you actually have been appointed twice now, right?
I have been. I was appointed in October 2010 and was unsuccessful in the 2012 primary.
In a hotly contested race, I might
Well,
add.
it was. I had 5 opponents. 2 of them were sitting judges, and I finished second. And second place doesn't count for anything because you don't, only the first place finisher wins. And then in November of 2012, the Supreme Court thought I was doing a very good job as a judge, I presume, because they appointed me to a different vacancy. So I have been a circuit judge now for since October 2010. It's coming up on 3.5 years.
And so this, of course, it's common that people run their first race and don't always win. The second time around is the charm, right?
I hope so. In this case, yes.
So many people talk about the idea of judges running versus being appointed, and I know we talked about this a little before the show. But it's really kind of a balance. I mean, there's pros and cons for either way you look at it, right? I mean, appointing judges has its own set of baggage, and running as judge has its own set of problems as well. So.
There are problems that with every system. There are things people like about the elective system, things people like about the appointive system, and vice versa. And I have not seen a system that is a vast improvement over what we have. Now, when the Supreme Court offered to appoint me a circuit judge, it's like putting me down at the card table, like this table here. The deck of cards out on the table calls for an elective system of judges because that's what the Illinois Constitution and Illinois law specifies. That's the deck of cards put in front of me for the card game. That's the rules we play by. So that's how it works. And that's fine because I tremendously enjoy speaking with people when I'm out campaigning. I really enjoy that because getting the feedback from people, hearing what's on their mind, what their concerns are, what they like, don't like about the judicial system, telling them about me, which is important. I don't necessarily enjoy all the driving I have to do across this
the late night
county.
appointments everywhere, right?
Well,
politics always happens after work hours, right?
Yes, that's true because I am an employee of the state of Illinois as a circuit court judge, and my work hours are work on the people's business as a judge. Campaigning comes afterwards. I joke about it, and I say it's my 7-day-a-week part-time job to try to keep my full-time job.
I think everyone in elected office would understand that.
Yes.
Coming back to your experience on the bench, you've had almost 4 years now to feel what it's like to be on the bench. And what do you think those years of experience have taught you about being a judge that you now bring as a candidate to campaign with?
It has taught me patience and has honed my ability to listen to people. My first career I was a reporter, so I knew how to listen to people and balance both sides. But it has heightened my ability to do that and to be patient and to be tolerant of people, to make sure I listen to people. There is a phrase, a Latin phrase, that is on the wall in the Supreme Court chambers down in Springfield and in the Supreme Court's courtroom here in Chicago. Audi alteram partem. Listen to the other side. And it's up on the wall facing the justices. So if they look up from the argument, that's what they see. Listen to the other side.
It actually reminds me of what used to be up in the city newsroom, which you as a reporter would remember. If your mother says she loves you, check it out.
Yes.
Right. So I would
Mike Royko said that many times in his columns back from his days as a city news reporter.
So let's talk about that a little. You have an interesting background then, because being an attorney and also having experience as a judge, but many years in the news business as well.
Well, I started in broadcasting out in Elgin because the school district had a radio station. As a sophomore in high school, working at the radio station. by the time between my junior and senior years in high school, I was working at the commercial station in Elgin, WRMN, as doing all kinds of staff announcing, news, music, whatever that you did there. I went to college at the University of Illinois, intending to major in broadcast journalism, which I did. I worked for 4 years doing news and sports reporting at WILL, which was the university radio station. While there, I didn't get to travel with the football and basketball teams, but on the home games, I did the color commentary, statistics, and analysis, and the halftime shows. Jim Turpin at that time was the announcer. Now it's Brian Barnard on the University Network. I also did high school football and basketball for one of the local stations in Champaign. So I did quite a bit of that play-by-play. Jim Turpin and I split the play-by-play because the high school basketball tournament was in Champaign at the Assembly Hall then in the late 60s when I was at the U of I. And we split the play-by-play on a statewide network of about 30 or 35 radio stations of the high school basketball tournament, which I got to do. And also for 4 years down there, I did play-by-play broadcast of all of the University of Illinois home baseball games. When a little-known pitcher from Chicago named Ken Holtzman was on the Illinois team. For Cubs fans, of course, they know instantly who Kenny Holtzman is.
Yeah, well,
and yes, in college, he was an excellent pitcher then, too.
And I think you have to be a kind of our generation to know who Ken Holtzman is. But I certainly remember. Yes, I pitched a no-hitter for the Cubs, in fact.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. So working then in news, as a reporter, you mentioned earlier that as a reporter gave you a certain set of skills. What do you learn as a reporter that now helps you as a judge?
Well, you learn fairness and balance, because it is very important as a reporter to listen to both sides if there's any kind of controversy or to find out what it is, and right straight down the middle in your reporting. You can't be an advocate one side or the other, which is exactly the role I have as a judge. I have to listen to both sides,
determine what's really happening, apply the facts that they're presented to me, the admissible facts as they're presented to me in evidence, and make a decision, one way or the other. And where I sit in the Chancery Division, we don't have juries. I am the decision maker. In all the cases you
In every case. That's just the way it is in Chancery. It's a court of equity, and because in law division it's money damages, but in Chancery it's a court of equity.
And what does that mean, a court of equity? What happens there?
Oh, well, I hear mortgage foreclosure cases is my assignment, but it's where you're balancing like a partnership breakup. What's the equities of that?
How do you divide it up?
As opposed to the law division where somebody's injured, for example, and wants to collect money.
And Chancery does not hear criminal cases. That's criminal.
No, that's in criminal court out of 26th in California, and there are criminal courts in the various municipal districts as well have to hear different types of crimes. And in traffic court is criminal law, because
we don't think of that often.
You don't think of it, but it is. There are fines and penalties, and in the major rooms on the 4th floor at the Daily Center, there's DUI rooms, driving under the influence of whether it's alcohol or drugs or a combination. That's criminal law, and the possibility of sending somebody to the county jail for a period of time on a violation.
Now, of course, you don't have to wrestle with any of that in Chancery because you're working with the civil cases.
I'm on civil cases.
But that could change, right? As part of the circuit court, could you, in fact, be assigned to criminal division?
I could be. If Judge Evans decided he thought my talents and abilities were suited for what he needed right then, and that was an assignment to a criminal call at 26th Street or someplace else, he could assign me there. He could assign me there tomorrow if he wished to. I don't think he will, because I think he's pleased with the job I'm doing and I enjoy what I'm doing. But it's a possibility, because my assignment is at the pleasure of the chief judge.
Now, speaking of the pleasure of the chief judge or the pleasure of being a judge, I've interviewed a number of judges on the show over the years, and pretty much all of them say it's the best job I could ever imagine having.
Absolutely.
So
without
what makes
hesitation. It's the opportunity to help people and to help people work through and solve their problems. Yes, I have to make a decision. For example, I hear mortgage foreclosure cases. Of the 3.5 years I've been on the bench, I've heard foreclosure cases now for a year, since March of 2011. I was a judge for 4.5 months when I got assigned up to the Chancery Division. I see people And I particularly enjoy relating to the homeowners who come before me and are not represented by attorneys.
And is that common?
That's very common, particularly on the default call. My default call in the afternoon, homeowners who are not represented by attorneys. And I can see them when they come before me. I can see tension on their face. They're afraid because, good grief, I'm hauled into court as a defendant. I'm faced with the possibility that somebody bank wants to take my home away from me. That's a scary proposition.
Plus, I'm in court and I don't know how this works, and I'm not a lawyer, and
Exactly.
I'm completely
Exactly.
intimidated and confused.
Yes. I take the time to listen to them and to pay attention to what they have to say, give them the opportunity to speak and tell what they have tried to do in trying to work things out. And I make the effort to explain to them what the process is, how long that process is likely to take, and to emphasize to them that they have plenty of time while the court stuff is going on, if they are able to do it and wish to do it, to try to work something out with the bank, whether it's a loan modification, whether it's a short sale of the property, whether it's giving the property back as a deed in lieu of mortgage to get everything, to get the loan monkey off of their backs, that they have those options. But I emphasize that what happens here in court is here. What you're trying to work out with the bank is over here. It's an entirely separate
And it doesn't
thing.
come before you as a judge. It's between the homeowner and the bank.
That's right. Or the property owner and the bank if it's a commercial case. That's there. And what is important to me is if I can see that homeowner, pro se, meaning for himself, not with an attorney, step away from the bench and I can see those signs of tension have eased, then I feel that I'm doing my job right for that person. Now, I want to share something with you if I can find the right piece of paper from my pocket, because I want to get this right when I read it. The final order in a foreclosure case is when there's been a judgment of foreclosure entered and the house or property goes to a sale. Let's take a house and talk about a residential property. And it goes to a judicial sale or auction, and somebody buys it. Most often it's the bank, but it could be somebody else. And then the bank or the lender has to come back in on a motion to confirm that judicial sale. And it is at that time that a sale is confirmed that we set a date for possession. When, for example, you have to be out of your house. Now, that's not an easy decision to make.
I would imagine that because there are lives here.
We're talking about people's lives, their livelihood, their families. On 2 occasions, Kevin, I have received, after I've done that and set that possession date for homes, I have received letters, and I want to read part of one of them to you. It said, "Dear Judge Swanson, this week was the second time in your courtroom. Both times I observed your sensitivity toward the homeowners, including myself. I just wanted to thank you for your compassion in a very difficult situation." Now, that letter came after I told that woman when she had to be out of her house.
So she was going to lose the house anyway, and she still wrote you that letter,
Yes.
thanking you for your compassion and understanding.
Yes. Wow, that made my week. Not just my day,
Yeah.
Kevin, that made my week.
Well, as
Getting
you
that
talked
compliment.
about, when I asked you, why is this the greatest job? Because you can help people. There's a case with real feedback that a lot of us don't always get in our lives.
No, it's very rare to get that kind of feedback. It is absolutely rare.
So let me use that as an example to segue into something that I like to ask all the judge candidates who come on about a judicial philosophy. And what I mean by that is we all bring our own set of life experiences to whatever we're doing, and particularly in the role of judge, where you do have to make these difficult decisions that affect people's lives. There are perspectives that all of us bring based on what we've experienced that make us think about, in some cases, minority rights. If minorities have had a tougher time than mainstream or non-minority Americans, or if you, in your case, you've been a reporter, so you have some ideas of how to delve into facts. So how does that help shape a kind of philosophy of justice, as it were?
My philosophy of justice is to do as former Illinois Chief Justice Tom Fitzgerald told me, is to do the right thing.
And what guides that? I mean, I think most of us try to do that. How do you determine that?
What guides that is listening to people on both sides of the case, listening to them, watching them. watching their body language, watching how they say, how they move, what they do, sometimes can give an indication of how sincere they are. How
And you do
I
meet
don't want
people
to. I don't
who-
want to say factual or less than factual. That would be misleading. But just how genuine they are in what they're saying. And back to my years as a reporter, I had to do that as a reporter to try to see if somebody was trying to put one over on me in a story. And the same thing happens. For example, I've been on the bench about and for a month or so to hear evictions. It did not take me long there to spot landlords and tenants who were trying to take advantage of the system. Worked on both sides. I see some of the same thing even now in foreclosures. There are people who are trying to just stay in the house rent-free
for as long as
for
they
as
can
long as
string
they
it out.
possibly can string it out. There are, and it's a two-way street. It's on the other side too, being difficult and taking advantage of things. And my job as a judge is to see through all of that, listen to the facts that are presented, apply them to the law fairly and equally to everybody. That's my job. My philosophy is to be fair and equitable. As Judge Paul Biebel told me, and he's been a friend for years, long before either of us were judges, and he's the presiding judge at criminal court. And this may sound a little bit Pollyannish, but it is important for me to conduct a hearing or a case, whatever I'm deciding, so that the litigants on both sides not only feel that justice was done, but that they have received justice.
And I understand that distinction, that not only was justice done, but I believe, as if I'm in court, I believe that I got the fairest shake I could get from this proceeding.
Even if you lose.
Even if I lose, right? And I think that's what our election system is based on as well. That look, I ran fair and square, and either I won or I didn't win, but the process was clean and fair. And I think that's what you're talking about here, right?
Right. And that is my obligation, because I took an oath when I was sworn in as a judge to apply the law, uphold the Constitution of the state of Illinois and the United States and Illinois law, and apply it fairly and equally to all, without any consideration of gender, ethnic background, racial background, none of that. None of that applies. My own personal biases don't apply. My own personal preferences don't apply.
Now, let me ask you a somewhat related question. You talked earlier about people who come in and represent themselves, pro se.
Sure.
I realize a lot of people cannot afford to have legal representation. They can't hire an attorney. But what advantage or disadvantage do you see in having attorneys represent you, particularly in these kinds of foreclosure cases? How do you react to that? If someone has an attorney who knows how the thing works, is that to their advantage, or can it work the other way as well?
Well, it is not a disadvantage, but it is certainly every person's right who is an individual in court, if he or she wishes to represent himself or herself. That is certainly a right that you have. Nobody can take that away. If a person wants to hire an attorney, fine. That is a personal choice depending on circumstances, maybe what you can afford, maybe what you want to do. It makes no difference. That is an option for people. Certainly they can represent themselves if they wish. Now, a corporation or business entity cannot be in court representing itself, must have a lawyer under Illinois law. But an individual has that option.
Now, that's interesting. You see, this is one of the reasons I love doing this show. I learn things every time I do it. I had no idea that corporations would be handled differently in that respect.
Oh, sure.
Since corporations are, in fact, people under the law, I just find it interesting that in fact, that's a major difference.
No, that is a corporation or a business entity, an LLC, partnership entity must have an attorney.
Must be represented. Interesting. So coming back to the philosophy and coming back to your repertorial days, having the advantage of all this perspective, particularly, I think, reporting. As you move through, what do you try to establish a kind of vision of where the courts should go, and a vision for how the courts might help improve society?
Courts can improve society, I think, by being credible to everybody. One of the biggest issues is a feeling, particularly in minority communities, that the deck is stacked against them when they go to court. Mm-hmm. And that is not an easy hurdle to overcome in getting across to people that, no, the courts can be fair and equitable to everybody.
Do you have to do something special in those cases?
No.
Or do you have
I say no. I said that a little bit too quickly. I make a conscious effort in all cases to listen to people, to make sure everybody has the opportunity to speak and say what they're doing, and that is important. Because if I don't shut people off, unless they're being rude or uncivil or something like that. If somebody's being uncivil, I snap on it like that and cut it off. But if they're being conducted in a civil manner, focused on the issues, everybody has the opportunity to speak and tell their story, and I listen.
And what occurs to me is that, particularly if someone comes in who feels the deck is stacked, and may be reluctant even, they might think, oh, this is, why do I bother, or this is, I can't win this one anyway. Is there anything you might do in a case like that to try to help draw them out or try to reassure them?
Well, usually when somebody has that view, they come in with an attitude. Mm-hmm. And usually that seems to play out. They don't want to let the other side get a word in. They want to interrupt or do anything. And I caution people then, I stopped them. I said, look, you don't interrupt the other side, they won't interrupt you. And I make that very clear. And people will see me. If the other guy starts to interrupt, and I've told you I'm not going to let them interrupt you, and the lawyer on the other side over there starts to interrupt, nope.
Works both ways.
It's a two-way street, folks, and it's a level playing field. And I make that very clear, and I enforce that rigidly.
So that brings up another interesting question about controlling a courtroom. And we've talked about the idea of being fair and putting people at ease, but there is also a matter of, sort of like with teachers in school, you have to have command of your classroom.
And it is amazing the number of times I have to tell lawyers who are sitting back at the counsel table or back in the benches on the cell phone, turn it off, put it away. Because Judge Evans has come out with an order that cell phones only in certain places, and the courtroom is not one of them. Now, at the same time, one day in court, I had two lawyers in front of me arguing a case, and all of a sudden I saw a flash go off in the back corner of the courtroom. A guy had his cell phone out, and inadvertently, as it turned out,
took a picture.
Well, I don't know, but he set the flash off twice. Those lawyers moved apart, and he was up in front of me real quick. And I got the deputy in, take his phone out in the hall, check it, make sure there's no picture on it. There wasn't. It was an inadvertent mistake, as it turned out.
But you had to keep control.
But I had to keep control of the courtroom, and he was up in front of me in very few seconds. Well, just with a lecture.
On that note, we're out of time.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. You as a broadcast professional, you must know these go quickly.
Yes, they do.
Judge Swanson, I want to thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I hope we'll have you back after you've been elected.
And my ballot number is 142.
There you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin.
And thank you for joining us once again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can find us every Saturday night on Comcast Channel 19 at 8 o'clock. And you can find us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So until next time, thank you and good night.